Many of Toronto's subway stations, like St. Clair behind me, are named after cross streets, but many of them are not. And quite a few of the names actually predate the subway by over a century. Let's find out more. When the first subway line opened in 1954, the station at the south end was called Union, obviously named after Union Station. And then heading north from there, we have King, Queen, Dundas, which has since been renamed TMU, College, Wellesley, and Bloor, all cross streets. But then there's Rosedale.
There is a Rosedale Road, but it's a minor road. There's also Rosedale Valley Road, but neither of them intersects with Yonge or connects to the station. The station was named because it serves the Rosedale neighborhood. It doesn't attract a lot of riders, perhaps because it's in a lower density area without a lot of attractions, or perhaps because the rich people of Rosedale don't want to mix with the unwashed masses who use the subway. Next comes Summerhill, and while Summerhill Avenue does intersect with Yonge, the station is entirely south of it. In fact, Summerhill Avenue is one of the bridges you can see looking out the train window north of the station. Almost the entire run from here north to St. Clair used to be on the surface in an open cut, but it's been covered over the years, as I mentioned in my video about how sub our subway is. There's a magic link on screen, and I'll put a link down in the description so you can find it when you finish watching this video. Anyway, the station got its name because it's in the Summerhill neighborhood, and both the street and the neighborhood got their name from Summer Hill, the name of a house and its estate in the area. The three remaining stations on the original line, St. Clair, Davisville, and Eglinton, are named for their cross streets, though you could argue about Davisville because Davisville Avenue only exists on the east side of Yonge, while the station is on the west side, with its entrance off Chaplin Crescent and no entrance on Davisville Avenue. But the area is known as Davisville. When the subway was extended up University Avenue in 1963, there was a problem. All but one of the new stations were at the same cross streets that already had stations named after them on Yonge, so new names were needed for the new stations. Two of them have names referring to old city wards. In the 1830s, Toronto was divided into 5 wards, all named after saints, with 4 of them being the patron saints of England, Scotland, Ireland, and Wales, and the 5th being a patron saint of Canada. St. Andrew's Station is located by St. Andrew's Church, which was built right at the border of St. Andrew's Ward. Like St. Lawrence's Ward, whose name lives on in a neighborhood as well as St. Lawrence Hall and the St. Lawrence Market, St. Andrew's Ward had a public market. Today, the site is a public park. Osgood, of course, was named for the nearby landmark of Osgood Hall. St. Patrick was also named for its ward, and while that ward's original public market building burned down, its replacement still stands today. The next 2 are named for local landmarks. Queen's Park took the name of a park, whose name we also commonly use to refer to the Ontario Legislative Building. I did a video about the park, links in the usual places. And of course, Museum is named after the Royal Ontario Museum. And then we come to St. George. St. George's was one of the 5 wards, yet this isn't anywhere near that ward. It's named for St. George Street. Remember, Victorian Toronto was a very Protestant place, so lots of things got religious names. And with St. George being the patron saint of England, it's a very common name in the colonies. Next to open was the first phase of the Bloor-Danforth line in 1966, from Keele to Woodbine. Since this was perpendicular to the existing subway line, all its stations could safely be named after their cross streets, except one. Despite being an east-west road, Dundas Street crosses Bloor Street and pretty much at a right angle. I talked about that in my video about weird intersections in Toronto. You know where to find the links. The solution for this one was simple. It's a long way west of the existing Dundas station, so it got called Dundas West. and that set a pattern that we'll see in some later station names. As for the station at Yonge Street, it's an interchange station, so the original Bloor station got renamed Bloor-Yonge, but each line's platform has the name of the cross street for that line, not the whole double-barrel station name. 2 years later, in 1968, both ends of the Bloor-Danforth line were extended, followed later by an additional one-station extension on each end in 1980. And again, there were no issues with duplicate names, so everything is named after a cross street. Though some of them, like the various streets named Old Mill, are pretty minor streets, and you could argue whether High Park Station was named after the park directly or indirectly by way of High Park Avenue. In the early 1970s, the Yonge line was extended north, and everything was named after cross streets. Much later, North York Centre would be added as an infill station named after a local landmark. Later in that decade came the Spadina line, which sampled some of the methods I've already mentioned. Some stations were named after cross streets. The stations at St. Clair, Eglinton, and Lawrence were given names with West added, similar to Dundas West. And then there's a subway station named after a mall, Yorkdale.
I'm standing on the only part of Line 4 Sheppard that isn't below ground. It's the bridge carrying the line over the east branch of the Don River, just east of Leslie Station. I talked about that bridge a little bit more in the video I previously mentioned about how our subway system is. All of the new stations on this line were named after cross streets. And just like Bloor Station was renamed Bloor-Yonge when it got a second line, the same thing happened to Sheppard Station. It got renamed Sheppard-Yonge, although unlike Bloor, where the platforms on each level only have the name relevant to that line, the platforms at both levels at Sheppard-Yonge Station have the full name. Consistency is not always a strength of our system. Speaking of inconsistency, there's some of that on the extensions to the Spadina line. In 1996, a one-station extension opened to Downsview Station, named after the neighborhood where it's located. But then in 2017, when the subway line was extended up into Vaughan, they renamed Downsview to Sheppard West to free up the name Downsview for use at Downsview Park Station, which might have confused some people who already thought they knew where Downsview Station was. As for the rest of the stations on that extension, they're a bit of a dog's breakfast as far as naming is concerned, and there's even one of them that carries the name of a thing that doesn't even use that name anymore. That's Pioneer Village Station, named after what was formerly called Black Creek Pioneer Village, now known as the Village at Black Creek.
As for renamings, I already mentioned the renaming of Dundas to TMU. Eglinton West Station got renamed to Cedarvale in preparation for the opening of Line 5, the Eglinton Crosstown LRT, because Metrolinx doesn't like the use of words like West to differentiate stations. Yet somehow they didn't rename Finch West Station when Line 6, the Finch West LRT, opened, even though it has exactly the same problem. More inconsistency. But at least we can blame this one on Metrolinx, an excellent target for blame when it comes to transit construction in Toronto. I've taken shots at them in a few videos, including one about a sad milestone in the delays on the Eglinton line, yada yada yada. We've never named any stations as something south because we've never built a subway line south of an existing subway line. Finch West and Highway 407 could arguably have been called Keele North and Jane North, but since they're on a line that generally runs north-south, those really aren't cross streets. And we've never named any subway stations something east for basically the same reason. While Warden and Kennedy could have been called St. Clair East and Eglinton East, it's a generally east-west line, so the important cross streets run north-south. We did have a Scarborough RT station named Lawrence East because at that location the line ran perpendicular to Lawrence.
As for the LRT lines, well, those are Metrolinx projects. And as I mentioned before, Metrolinx has naming standards that frown on duplicating names of existing stations. So the stops and stations on those lines are generally named after the cross street if that doesn't conflict with an existing station, or otherwise they're named after things like neighborhoods or local landmarks. I've done opening videos on both Line 5 and Line 6. I'm sure you can find those. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you know what to do. Please like and subscribe.